Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Okay. So, exploring Dhammapada, this is the fourth time, and as I have mentioned, I'm using the Dhammapada, which was translated by Buddharakkhita. So if you want a copy of that, you can actually download from online. It's actually free, online free copy. There are actually many versions of Dhammapada throughout the history. Many versions of Dhammapada have been translated, but I find this is sort of, I like it myself, so I use this one. So as you remember, Dhammapada are a compilation of the verses which were spoken during the Buddha's time in the daily life. So they weren't really formal teachings of the Buddha. It was just sort of like casual or spontaneous conversation or spontaneous teachings that the Buddha gave in different situations when he encountered people or life situations or whatever, or because of the bhikkhus' behavior, whatever. So those are being compiled later on and being passed down throughout the history. And I think the most commonly used, one of the most commonly used suttas, commonly studied, is this Dhammapada, especially in the Theravadan tradition in Burma, Thailand, Sri Lanka. A lot of people actually memorize the Dhammapada. It's only 423 verses, but it's very commonly used. So I myself like Dhammapada a lot, and I flip over. I use it all the time, and as my own reference, as my own teachings throughout the days. Sometimes I'm sort of couldn't find any solution, and or troubled. Then I take out the Dhammapada and just flip it open and read it. And sometimes I go on to read the stories. Try to see if you can actually make use of Dhammapada. And for those, I think all the Chinese probably have the Chinese version. And if you don't have it, just let me know, and we'll have all the little book of Chinese version. Okay, so these are the themes that we explore about Dhammapada, and we have done 3 so far. The first one is human life is rare and precious. Second is self-discipline. The last one we did was cause and effect. That means karma. And this week we'll do happiness. And then there are 3 more to come: good friends, self-reliance, and following the Dhamma. So those are the themes that we will explore with Dhammapada. So let us go back to last time or last month about the reflections on cause and effect. The law of causation, that means karma. Or karma is another word to represent law of causation. So we talk about causes and effect last time. quite a bit. And it seems that throughout the last talk, I actually focus a lot on evil actions or unwholesome actions. But remember, everything is sort of like duality. So when you are not performing unwholesome actions, you're very likely to perform neutral actions or wholesome actions. So if you have, of course, when you perform unwholesome actions, you are planting those unwholesome seeds, and the results will be unwholesome consequences. Similarly, if with the willed wholesome action, then wholesome consequences will result. That's the law. That's the nature, right? So let us go to reflections and spend a few minutes on reflections, and we can actually go a short discussion. So, which one worries you most? The cause or the effect? The cause or the effect, and why? And give me an example in your life experiences about cause and effect. And then have you learned anything from that experience? Anything. Any of these 4 reflections. You can touch on them if you have something to share. Now, we would love to hear it. Anybody? Irene, yeah?
Everyone.
Hello.
So I would like to share, I believe which one worries me the most is the cost.
Mm.
And why? Because when the conditions are right, and the timing's there, and then the cost, the effects will show. Either it's a good one or bad one. So it depends on the impact, like the action that you perform is wholesome or unwholesome. If unwholesome, then you will see, like Sifu said, there's a flower effect, or a heavy one too,
Mm.
So it's very dangerous. But what I want to share is I thought about that and I contemplated about this topic, and there's many of causes and effects that impact and happen in my life too. But I chose one. Just happened recently. That is, and I still feel very happy. And it's just happened that like today's topic is happiness. That is my trip to Po Lam and stay there for 10 days. And I don't know what happened there, why, but when I came back, I'm still so happy.
You still happy? You're still happy?
Happy.
Oh, that's good. That long lasting.
Yeah. So you guys need to make a trip to there and then, really bow to the Buddha. It's incredible. The energy there is incredible, So it really helped me to shift and more focus inward when there is something happen, either a conversation or like argument or not, we'll just stop and reflect inward afterward and see why I react to such situations, just like a short reaction to my kid's attitude or something. But anyway, it just really helped. After this trip, I don't know why, so still so happy. So that's the cost that I made it to Po Lam for 10 days. And the effect is long-lasting happiness.
Congratulations, good for you. That's well. Next one, you never know. Don't expect it to be the same, okay? Even happier. Great. Good. Okay. Anybody else? That's quite nice to spend 10 days and then you're happy forever. Nora? Yes, Nora. Long time no see, Nora.
So what worries me the most is the effect. So, you know, if I do something bad, that I know I'm going to have a bad result.
Yeah.
So
Consequence, yeah.
Consequences of my actions worry me. And a funny example of this, I can think of when I was 16 and I just got my driver's license, and before that morning, I'd gone shopping and I'd stolen a top that was worth $10.
Oh.
And I mean, it wasn't something like I was into stealing. It was just my group of friends. We just went through this phase. I don't know why. Anyhow, so I stole this top for $10, and then I went to visit my sister, and I parked on. She lived her apartment was on a main street, and I got a parking ticket for $10.
That's
so bad. I don't really believe in instant karma, but it was just like so bizarre.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I love that sharing. That's instant karma, Nora.
I know, exactly.
Wow.
I never do.
Good for you, though. Good for you. I mean, that was a very kind reminder from the universe to you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Don't you ever steal again. Yeah. Right. Yeah. You weren't being caught, and yet you also get reminded from this universe that don't you ever steal again. You'll get a bigger ticket next time. Oh, I like that, Nora. Thank you. That's hilarious. Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing, Nora. Okay. Anybody else? Have you spent some time on reflecting on these questions? Hi, Catherine.
Hi, Sifu.
Hello. Long time no see. Yeah.
Yeah. So what worries me more is, of course, the effect.
Yeah.
Because whatever that is, the effect always, if you did something not good, then the unwholesome thing will come up to bad karma, and then you get very bad consequence.
Yeah.
A good example is, I was diagnosed in May with appendicitis, okay?
Yeah.
But then it's not acute, so doctors say you don't have to do anything. But then, now everywhere is open up, and then I went out to meet with friends, and that day it was so hot, and I had an iced lemon tea. It's not only one, but I had two.
Uh-huh.
So imagine I'm in Hong Kong because so many years I haven't been. So I had two iced lemon tea, and then my appendix start, having trouble again.
Oh, kicking up.
What I learned is whenever I go out, even if I go out with friends, I have to be mindful of what I'm eating. And even though if they're having iced lemon tea or something, really tasty but not good for my health, so I just bring my own food.
That's good too. But I don't know whether your lemon tea has anything to do with your pancreatitis.
I don't know.
I doubt that. But that's a good mindfulness. Less craving. Good. Okay, great. Thank you. Anybody else? No? Really? That's a big topic, cause and effect. Okay, so Just before in this afternoon, we got a message from Eva. And she said, I made a very stupid mistake today. That was I'm sorry. I think I need to share. It's so I think it's so hilarious, but it's so true. A cause and effect. She went to the back of the property, where they were doing the landscaping, and she was all sucked into the mud. So she had to go home and change and wash herself, and then came back. And so I said, don't you, please, you guys, please don't go there. They are doing site work, and that is a filtration field. And filtration field is very soft and soggy. And the landscaper is working on it. They're trying to make that a walking area. So it's not a walking area yet, you see? That's an instant effect. The cause is because you just wanted to go into the mud, or just curious to see what's happening down there. So that curiosity lead you to be sucked in to the mud, by the mud.
And the really stupid part is that it took me like 4 steps to realize I should turn back. I didn't turn back.
You didn't turn back and you walk on?
No. It took me like 4 steps.
Before you realized that you should turn back? Oh, that's a little bit too late. That was a little bit too slow. So, that's also instant result that taught you a lesson, Don't go into the construction site. Even though you have approval to go into the buildings, that doesn't mean that you can go everywhere. Okay? So yeah, just be very mindful. Good thing that you didn't fall. Otherwise you'll be all muddy and bump your head, because so many big boulders there. Yeah. Be careful. Yeah, not going there anymore, okay? All right. Anybody else? Effect, cause and effect. I'm surprised that you actually worry more about the effects than the cause. Which we really should change our mentality. Really should worry more about the cause than the effect. Because with the cause, there will come an effect. And that's already too late. When the effect appears, that's already too late. You cannot change it anymore. Of course, you can change how your attitude to deal with that effect. And then you hopefully you will change and correct yourself for the future. But it's really wiser. It's really wiser to really start worrying, or not really just worry, just paying more attention to the cause rather than the effect. That's why in the Mahayana traditions, there is a saying is that all sentient beings are just afraid of cause of effects, worry about effects. But Bodhisattvas are very aware of causes, so they make sure that they don't plant unwholesome causes. So when you don't plant unwholesome causes, definitely you will not reap unwholesome consequences, right? And if you plant wholesome causes, You don't need to wish for wholesome consequences. Wholesome consequences will naturally arise, will naturally come. Okay, so last one, Mali.
Nice to see you.
Hi, good evening, yes.
So which one worry us the most is, as you said, cause, because there is no effect if there's no cause.
Yes.
Give an example. So it's,
If there is no
I was thinking more of a positive action that brings positive results.
Of course.
It's about practicing generosity.
Yeah.
So sometimes what we do, especially during COVID times, we used to order food for somebody who is alone, or somebody who is
Elderly.
didn't have neighbors who are sick. We would do that, and I think the receiver feels cared for, and we feel really happy for doing something like that.
Yeah.
So what we learn from it is that it's not just the giver who is getting the receiver who is going to be happy. It's us too.
Yeah, of course. Yes, of course. It's always mutual.
Yeah, that's a positive kind of. But when we talk about cause and effect, we always assume it's negative. For some reason, I don't know. I was looking at it that way earlier. And I thought, well, it can be something wholesome.
Of course. When people think of karma, it seems that people already sort of stigmatize the word as unwholesome. But no, karma is just actions. Actions, cause and effects, actions that you have done. So it could be positive, it could be wholesome, or it could be neutral, or it could be unwholesome. So I'm glad that you're sharing positive or wholesome karma. Good.
So one thing I can add to what I said. So when we do this kind of sharing, practicing generosity, we discuss it with our kids. So now they've started doing the same.
Good.
Last week, some phone and said, "Oh, Mom, I did this, and I was feeling really happy."
Yeah.
And, because they didn't understand that at the beginning. I mean, giving is giving, right? Now that we talked about it, they sort of, they feel that, okay, this is something more than that.
Yeah. Deeper and more than that. Yeah, great. Very good. Great. Okay, so, I forgot to do something today. Never mind. Okay, all right. So, today we talk about happiness. What brings happiness? What brings happiness? In the mundane world, most people think that happiness comes from being rich, famous, being successful, being powerful, and in the commercial world, then you make lots of money, you make products, or in the academic world, you get PhD, you get master, you get many PhD, you get many master degree, and you write many articles, and you're a very famous scholar, and all those. And then people think that is success, that will bring happiness. But really, in the Buddha's teachings, no, he didn't think so. So in the Buddha's teachings, he said happiness is not something that comes from this material satisfaction. So what really brings happiness? So we look at verse 35. It says, "Wonderful indeed it is to subdue the mind, so difficult to subdue, ever swift, and wandering wherever it desires, a tamed mind brings happiness." So you can see what brings happiness. A tamed mind brings happiness. An untamed mind brings unhappiness. So logical. So we can see to subdue the mind, and it says very difficult to subdue the mind. You and me, you and I know it's very difficult to subdue our monkey mind. The mind keeps jumping from one branch to another branch, never stop jumping, never. And maybe for a split second, that monkey mind seems to have settled, and you say, "Oh, nice, it's settled." Then next minute, next second, right there, it starts jumping. So it's very difficult to subdue this monkey mind, this mind, because it is so swift, and it wanders wherever it desires. So when we do not have the control over the mind, it controls us. It wants to go there, then you follow it. It wants to go here, you follow it. If we don't practice to train and tame this mind. So that's why I always say meditation is training and taming this wild mind, this monkey mind. So this is talking about happiness. And when the mind is being tamed, it doesn't need to go to specially look for happiness. When the mind is tamed, there is this inner happiness that's naturally is there. You don't have to go and look for happiness. You don't have to go and do something to be happy, to make yourself happy, or to eat something to make yourself happy. You don't have to. It's in there. It's in there. So in verse 35 and the coming verses, it talks about where and how we can be happy. So we all know when we try to subdue the mind, it's so difficult. But through training, through perseverance, through patience, it's possible. So we all have experienced that ourselves through years of practice. In the beginning of the practice, we might not be able to sit even for 10 minutes quietly, steadily. But then throughout the years, we put in the efforts, having the patience, perseverance, and determination. Gradually, we're able to sit 20 minutes and 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 50, and then an hour. Even though throughout the hour, this mind will still jump here and there, but still you're able to maintain a stable body and yet an observant mind to observe that jumpy mind. So part of the mind is being subdued, but not all of the mind. When all of the mind is subdued, we enter the stream, we go into the four fruits, and we become Bodhisattva or even Buddha already, right? So it's still a long way, but it's possible that we are able to subdue the mind. Okay, so then the next verse would talk about happiness. It says, let the discerning person guard his mind, so difficult to detect and extremely subtle, wandering wherever it desires. A guarded mind brings happiness. Similarly, as the last verse, it talks about a guarded mind. And an unguarded mind is very difficult to detect. So difficult to detect and extremely subtle. So we can actually reflect upon ourselves is sometimes we do things, sometimes we say things, sometimes we think about things. And where why and how? Why did I think like this? How do I get to think like this? And why do I think like this? But most of us actually don't sit down and reflect upon that seriously. Most of us just shuffle off, oh, I've said something nasty today. That's okay, it's gone. Then, but if we start to reflect upon that action that we've done today, either to people or either to ourselves, or just did something, and we think that is not correct. That makes me unhappy. That makes me, thinking that I'm unwise. And then do you actually start reflecting upon it yourself? Why did I do this? How come I do it like this? What happens? If we start to reflect upon it a little bit more, we'll be able to see those thoughts are very subtle. Some of the thoughts are very subtle, very, very fleeting, and sometimes you don't catch them. But if you develop a habit of reflection, you will be able to catch them sooner. Okay? So with this verse, there is a story behind it, and it's talking about a disgruntled bhikkhu, a very disgruntled bhikkhu. So the Buddha said this verse to a young bhikkhu who was the son of a very well-off banker. And this young man, one time, he asked a bhikkhu who used to go to his house for offerings, for alms. And this young man asked the bhikkhu, so what should I do to be liberated from the unhappiness of life? And the bhikkhu said to him, well, you should divide your property into 3 parts. The first part is you go and make use of the money to do business with. And then the second part is you use that part, 1/3 of the money, to sustain the family. And then the last third is you give to charity. So the young man heard what the bhikkhu told him, so he followed his instructions. He did it. And then he came back to the bhikkhu and said, so what should I do next so that I could get rid of the unhappiness, the ills of life? So the bhikkhu told this young man, he said, well, first you should go and take refuge in the Triple Gems, having faith in the Buddha, in the Dhamma, and in the Sangha. And then you start to observe the 5 precepts. Not to kill, not to steal, not to lie, not to commit adultery, and not to take intoxicants. And then after that, you could advise to take 10 precepts. That means not to wear perfume, not to intentionally go to listen to concerts, music, and not to decorate yourself, not to sleep on high beds, and not to touch money in those old days, and not to sleep on high beds and sit on high chairs. So those are 10 precepts. And then lastly, he said, you can renounce the mundane life and enter the monastic life in order to be free from this unhappiness, the ills of life. So this young man heard what the bhikkhu said, and he followed, and he became a bhikkhu. He became a monk. As a bhikkhu, he was given teachings in very difficult teachings in the Abhidhamma and also in the Vinaya, that means the precepts. And as you all know, that the Vinaya for Bhikkhu is 250 and for Bhikkhuni is 348. That is really not easy. So then Abhidhamma is actually also very difficult too. And he thought, oh, so difficult, this Abhidhamma. And these precepts, Vinaya, is so strict, and and I can't even stretch my arms out like that. You know, we were not supposed to like yawn and like this. Sometimes you, like I see Goldie, our dog, you know, after a good sleep, then she was just stretched like this. And we were not supposed to do this because it's, you know, it doesn't look nice, right? It doesn't look proper. And he said, it's too much. It's no freedom at all. They think that is no freedom. So this bhikkhu said, well, I think I better disrobe and become a householder again. So as a result of doubt and discontent, he became unhappy, very unhappy. And he kept on neglecting his duties as a bhikkhu. And he also became very thin and emaciated, so skinny. And because he's not happy, right? So when the Buddha came to know about this bhikkhu, then he said to this young bhikkhu, he said, let yourself guard your own mind, because this mind is very difficult to detect. If you can only control your mind, you will have nothing more to control. So guard your own mind. If you want to be happy, you have to guard your mind, because it's the mind that makes you happy, or it's the mind that makes you unhappy. Okay? It's nobody else. And then when in the Dhammapada, it also talk about how association with people, with the right people, can bring you happiness. So I use the word happy association. So in verse 206, actually 206, 207, and 208, actually the Buddha set these three verses together in the same situation, under the same circumstances. 206, 207, and 208. But we are going just to look at 206 and 207. So 206, he said, good it is to see the noble ones. To live with them is ever blissful. One will always be happy by not encountering fools. So it tells you, how can you become happy? Is stop encountering fools, then you will become happy. You will have happiness. But we are very foolish ourselves. We are very foolish ourselves. We always go to have a great relationship with fools rather than with the wise ones. Why? Because we're foolish. That's all. We're ignorant. And we are scared. And sometimes we are scared, sometimes we are afraid, or sometimes we don't have confidence in ourselves. So, and most of all, we are actually ignorant. That's why we relate to the foolish, to the fool, rather than to the wise. So, here the story behind verse 206 is talking about the king Sakka. You know, Sakka is the king of heaven. And at one time, the Buddha was very ill. And the king Sakka came to look after the Buddha. And Buddha told him, you don't have to look after me. I have many bhikkhus who will look after me. But Sakka insisted on looking after the Buddha for 10 months. When the Buddha, well, later on, the Buddha actually passed into Parinibbana. So he came, he looked after, and then the bhikkhu were very surprised to see the King Sakka came to look after the Buddha, and so they asked the Buddha, why would King Sakka attend to your ailments for so long? And the Buddha told the bhikkhus, there is no surprising about the Sakka looking after me, because once in the old days, when the former Sakka was growing very, very old, and he was about to pass away, and he came to see me. Then I taught him the Dhamma. The Buddha said, I taught him the Dhamma. While listening to the Dhamma, he attained the first fruit, the Sotapanna. And then he passed away and reborn as the King of Sakka, the King of Heaven. All this happened to him simply because he listened to the Dhamma. He associated with the wise. So the Buddha said, so bhikkhus, it is good to see the noble ones, especially the Buddha, right? Arya, noble person. And it is a pleasure to live with them. And to live with fools is indeed painful. I think we could relate to that. We always think that others are foolish. When we live in the communities, especially when people come into a monastic community as fresh bees, and like freshmen into college, always being made fun of, or sometimes the fresh ones are still so in the head, so mundane. So they bring in all these mundane thoughts, mundane behavior. And the old bees think that, oh, they are so fresh, they don't know anything. So, there's constant conflicts. And this one think that one is foolish, and that one think this one is even more foolish. So it's constantly thinking the other side is foolish than themselves. So actually that is quite foolish to think that about others being foolish. Okay? That is I think that's the most foolish. So to live, and then when we think that to live with fools is painful, think about that. Is that fool is really others foolish? Is really that outside person foolish? Or you thinking that people is foolish? That fool is yourself. Think about that. You yourself is the fool. So when you are foolish, you will not be happy. So always be happy by not encountering fools. First fool that you encounter is yourself. For me, how I read this verse, how I actually interpret this verse is not the outside fools, it's the inside fool. So just be wise and not to relate to your inside fool all the time. Okay? So that's what the Buddha said. One will always be happy. And then 207, he said, indeed, one who moves in the company of fools grieves for a long time. Of course you will be. Whether the outside fools or the inside fools, you'll be grieving for a long, long time. You'll be very unhappy. And association with fools is ever painful, like partnership with an enemy. But happy is association with the wise, like meeting one's own relatives. So you will say, I'm not in good terms with my relatives. So you are very exceptional. Okay, but that's not the Buddha meant to be, meant to say. He meant to say is always have harmony within the family. Remember, in the Buddha's words, the one chapter is talking about harmony in family and how does a wife should treat a husband, and how should a father or a husband treat the wife, and how should a father treat a son, a daughter, and how should the children treat the parents, and how should the servant treat the boss, and how should the boss look after the servant. So in the Buddha's word, there is a chapter like that. So you can go and refresh your memory in that book, from that book. So happy is association with the wise, like meeting one's own relatives. So not to associate with the foolish, but to associate with the wise, and to honor those who are worthy of honor. And this is the greatest blessing. That is from the Mangala Sutta. Remember the first 4 blessings in the Mangala Sutta, Gacchang King. It says not to associate with the foolish, but to associate with the wise, and to honor those who are worthy of honor. This is the greatest blessing. And with greatest blessing, bring great happiness. It's natural, right? So that means we have to make the right choice of who to associate with. Friends, colleagues, sometimes you don't have a choice to choose. Families, you don't have a choice to choose. But friends, you have a choice. So if you find that the friends are not very dharmic, are not very moral, you have a choice to walk away, to associate less. Okay, but if you have friends who are very moral, who are very diligent, who are very mindful, very generous, very kind and compassionate, and then you try to make an effort to associate with those friends on a more frequent basis for your own benefits, to learn from them. Okay, so verse 376, he said, let him associate with friends who are noble, energetic, and pure in life. Let him be cordial and refined in conduct. Thus, full of joy, he will make an end of suffering. End of suffering, that means you're free of suffering. That means on the other side, you will be happy. Right? If you don't suffer, that means you're happy. If you are happy, that means you're not suffering. It's so simple. So, end of suffering means full of happiness. There's no place for suffering to exist when you're happy. But when you are suffering, there is no place for happiness to be there. Okay? So he says, the Buddha said, let him associate with friends who are noble, energetic, and pure in life. So do not associate with the foolish. Because why? Friends could be very, very influential. And if you have some friends who are negatively influential, then you will have that impact from them. But if you have friends who are very positive and who are very moral, as I said just now, then you will learn a lot from them. So associate with those noble, energetic, and pure people in your life. Then you will be free of sufferings. So those are the happy association or wholesome association. So, and the next one is way to happiness. So there are many ways to happiness. Many ways to happiness. There is this mundane way. You think that, oh, I strive forward to be successful, to be famous, to be powerful, to be authoritative, whatever. No, that's not what the Buddha taught. The Buddha taught way to happiness is way more supramundane. And he says in here, verse 201, it says, victory begets amity. The defeated dwell in pain. Happily the peaceful live, discarding both victory and defeat. So this is a story from about the defeat of the king of Kosala. The Buddha uttered this verse while he was in the Jetavana monastery in Jeta Grove. The king of Kosala was defeated in battle by his own nephew. His sister was married to this Ajatasattu. So the king of Kosala was defeated 3 times by this Ajatasattu. And he was very depressed and he felt very ashamed about this 3 times defeat. And he lamented, and he's always said to himself, what a disgrace. I cannot even conquer this boy who still smells of mother's milk, he says. That means very young, right? Immature to him. And it is better that I should die. So King Kosala thought that it was such a disgrace to have been defeated by this Ajatasattu for 3 times, because he was so young and so immature that he shouldn't lose his battle to him. So he felt so depressed, felt so much ashamed, and he refused to eat. So he went on a hunger strike. And he didn't rise every day. He just stayed in his bed and became so distressed. And the words about the king's situation is actually spread to the Buddha's ears. And the Buddha heard them. The Buddha said to the bhikkhus, actually he was teaching the bhikkhus. He said, bhikkhus, similar like this, victory begets amity, the defeated dwell in pain, happily the peaceful live, discarding both victory and defeat. So he said, bhikkhus, in one who conquers, in one who wins the war, amity and hatred will increase because they would want to increase their territory. They may want to, fight another war again. One who is defeated will feel pain and distress, but a wise one would not do so. A wise one would live happily, ignoring or discarding whether it's a defeat or it's a victory. And a wise one won't even go to war. A wise person won't even go to war, right? Let alone really needing to discard both victory and defeat. So here, this way to happiness is don't start a war. Don't start a war. Don't start a war with yourself. Don't start a war with others. That's one way to happiness. And then the next verse we talk about, you can see is 379 jumps all the way almost to the end. Is by oneself one must censor oneself and scrutinize oneself. The self-guarded and mindful monk will always live in happiness. This is towards the end is actually 379 is talking about the monk. The whole chapter is talking about the monk. So that's why it says the self-guarded and mindful monk will always live in happiness. But I think similarly, the self-guarded and mindful person will always live in happiness. So we can look at this verse in two parts. The first part is by oneself, one must censor oneself and scrutinize oneself. That means one should not be too lenient with themselves. But yet, don't bash yourself all the time. One must censor oneself. That means one must guard oneself. Guard oneself and check on oneself and reflect upon oneself. That means one has to also check on the morality, right? Check on whether they are diligent. Check on themselves whether they are wasteful. Check on oneself whether they're selfish. And I talk about morality, right? And check on oneself on all sorts of qualities, right? Generosity, sila, samadhi, panya, metta, karuna, compassion, loving kindness, compassion. So one has to guard oneself in all these aspects. But in order to actually censor oneself and scrutinize oneself, there is one very important quality that one needs to have. What is that? I'm asking, what is that quality? I'm asking. Nora?
I'm going to guess because you said don't be too hard on yourself, so have some self-compassion at the same time.
Okay. Yeah, all right, good. But how can you know that you're not bashing yourself? How can you know that? How can you have some compassion for yourself? How can you know? By being honest? Honest. Ever said honest? How can you know that you're honest or not? Huh? Self-awareness. Mindfulness. Mindfulness. KS, were you going to say mindfulness? I didn't see you. I didn't see you put up your hand. I only saw you. Yeah?
I was a bit slow in turning on the mic.
Oh, you should raise your hand first. Yeah. Mindfulness. Yes, mindfulness. Self-guarded mindfulness. What you said was right. Honesty, self-compassion, they are all correct. But you have to have that mindfulness in order to know whether you're honest. Right? In order to know that you have to love yourself. Are you loving yourself or you're bashing yourself? You have to know. And that knowing is being mindful. Right? So mindfulness is actually very, very important. Very, 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 you have to develop very strong mindfulness. Otherwise, you wouldn't know about yourself. You wouldn't know whether you are stingy, you wouldn't know whether you are arrogant, you wouldn't know whether you are wasteful, you wouldn't know whether you're generous, you wouldn't know whether you are loving kindness, you wouldn't know whether you're honest. You wouldn't know. Only even if you know, it will be very superficial if you don't have very strong mindfulness. Okay? So when that part, one has to censor oneself and scrutinize oneself with very strong mindfulness. Okay? And the self-guarded and mindful monk will always live in happiness. That's the result of being mindful. Developing that strong mindfulness. Okay? So there's two parts. One is the cause, the other part is the result in this verse. All right? Okay, so let us go further exploring about happiness. So, in Dhammapada, which verse tell us how far does happiness go? How far does happiness go? And happiness goes quite far, very far, very, very far. Okay, so verse 168, we look at verse 168. Arise, do not be heedless. Lead a life of good conduct. Righteous live happily both in this world and the next. So you can see happiness travels very fast, go very fast. It takes you very far. It takes you, not only this life makes you happy, but into the future. This world, that means this life. The next world, that means next life. Or the next lives, many, many lives. So happiness travels very far. It goes very far. It doesn't just stay here. Look at Irene. She spent 10 days in Po Lam and she's back for a month already in the Bay Area. She's still happy. Okay, so that's it goes far. And 169 it says, lead a life of good conduct, do not lead a base life. That means a low life. The righteous live happily, both in this world and the next. Okay, so this life and the next life. (169, 168). So it's talking about the world, the chapter on the world. So here the difference between this one and the last one is lead a life of good conduct. Here is that lead a life of good conduct. Do not lead a base life. And then the same is the righteous live happily both in this world and the next. So why would the Buddha say these words or said these words? He is talking about his father. His father, the king, Suddhodana. And so the Buddha one time was staying in the Negrodharma monastery, and he gave his teachings to his relatives, his families. And the king, being the father of the Buddha, thinking that, well, my son was very close to my home, and he will have to go out for alms tomorrow. So I'm sure that he will come to my house for alms, for offerings. But he did not invite the Buddha to come for alms. He thought that the Buddha would come. So next morning he prepared a lot of food, and very good food for giving alms to many, many hundreds of thousands of bhikkhus. But the Buddha did not come. And he was waiting, but his daughter-in-law, that means the Buddha's wife, Yasodhara, she looked out from the window of the palace, and she saw the Buddha was going around for alms, but he wasn't coming to the house. And he finished going for alms already. So she went down from the top floor went down to tell her father-in-law that the Buddha is not coming. Though the king was not happy, King Suddhodana wasn't happy, so he went to challenge the Buddha. He said, You are the family. You are the family. And the family of Katya. In the old days, the Katya was like one of the high rank in the caste, right, system. And you should not go around to other houses for alms. You should come back to your father's house for alms. Why didn't you come? And this is a disgrace that you go from door to door begging for food. And the Buddha said to him, this is what all the past Buddhas did. And I'm following the tradition, the good tradition. And this is a good conduct that all the Buddhas passed down. And this is the practice of all the past Buddhas. And I am just following examples of the past Buddhas because it is right and it is proper for me to keep up the good tradition. And the king didn't have any word to say because the Buddha was so wise in giving such a wise answer, because he is not his son anymore. He is the Buddha. And so he was following the footsteps of all the past Buddhas. And he was upholding a good deed, a good conduct. So the Buddha said, we always have to keep up our life, not to go onto the base life. That means a low life, a base life. We need to rise up and to live a righteous life, because righteous life will bring happiness this lifetime and the future lifetime. Okay, so, and then 122 it says, one who while himself seeking happiness does not oppress with violence other beings who also desire happiness will find happiness hereafter. Hereafter, that means here in this world and in the future world. So one who seeks his own happiness by oppressing others will not be happy in the future lives. They will only be happy right here now. But because why? Because others also want to be happy, and you oppressing them, then how are you going to make yourself happy? You're not planting happy seeds. You're not planting wholesome seeds. How can you reap wholesome consequences of happiness? You won't, and you can't. So actually 132 actually go with 131 also. So they are the similar verses that the Buddha spoke at the same time. And he said, one who, while himself seeking happiness, oppresses with violence other beings who will not attain happiness hereafter. One who, while himself seeking happiness, does not oppress. 131 is somebody oppresses, and 132 is does not oppress. So one is oppressing, one doesn't oppress. So you can see the result is one who doesn't oppress those people who are seeking happiness, they will be happy themselves. But one who is oppressing those people who are seeking happiness, they will not be happy. So this is way to happiness. And how far does happiness go? Happiness go far, very far. But who and what is in control of happiness? Who control us to be happy or not happy? You? Me? I? Yeah. You, me, I. Yeah, I, me. So this is my favorite verse 1 and 2. Right? Because we are talking about happiness, so I'll jump on to verse 2. So the first one is talking about sufferings. So verse 2 talk about happiness. So verse 2, it says, mind precedes all mental states, and mind is their chief. They are all mind-wrought. If with a pure mind a person speaks or acts, happiness follows him like his never departing shadow. So we are very familiar with this verse. I constantly bring it up. And verse 1 is, mind precedes all mental states, mind is their chief, they are all mind-wrought. The first three sentences are the same. If with an impure mind a person speaks or acts, suffering follows him, like the wheel that follows the foot of the ox, or the footprints of the ox, you can say. So, verse 1 and verse 2 talk about how we are controlled by our mind. So, happiness, if we want to be happy, we have to guard the mind. We have to censor ourselves. We have to scrutinize ourselves. We have to reflect ourselves. And most of all, with mindfulness, we need to correct ourselves and change ourselves. And with further mindfulness, we can transform ourselves. So that's why when people start to adopt a very rigorous practice in meditation and a very regular practice, they will gradually open up. They will gradually brighten up. They will gradually become happier and less sulky, less angry. If you are still that angry, if you are still that impulsive, if you are still that so reactive, you have to check on yourself. Is your mindfulness working? Are you actually using your mindfulness in your daily life? Are you actually applying it in your daily life? If you are not, then you are just like that big tree, like that big piece of boulder sitting at the back of the filtration field. Sitting there for hundreds of years, it's going to sit there for hundreds of years because we are not going to move it. We're not able to move it. It's too heavy, right? So no matter how, I always say this, no matter how many retreats you attend, no matter how long you can sit, if during the day, during your life, when you are in actions, when you are in relationships, dealing with people, you are a different person. You are not calm, you're not mindful, you're impulsive, you're reactive, you're angry, then you better check yourself. You better check yourself. You better scrutinize yourself more. That time you have to bash yourself. Because to wake yourself up, hey, you stop doing that. You are just a meditator on paper. Not a meditator in the reality, in practice. So very, I think these two verses, verse 1 and verse 2, are very enlightening verses, very enlightening teachings that we all can use it days in and days out. And mind precedes all mental states. Anger, ill will, animosity, these are mental states. The most important is the mind. The mind is the back screen director, behind the screen director, and it directs us all the time. So that is happiness. I don't know whether I'd have talked about happiness, but I have talked about happiness. And the verses from Dhammapada talking about happiness, though some of them are not really directly talking about happiness, but it tells you the way out of misery, and then that means the way to happiness. Okay, Eva wanted me to talk about this inmate that we visited last week, and Eva went to visit him this morning without me. I couldn't go because I had meetings. Last week when we went in there, it has been 3-4 months since we last saw him, right? Yeah. Well, he is end-stage cancer, but he had been meditating with us for over 5 years before the COVID, and he never missed one sitting. Every Thursday and every one-day course, he would be there. He is a devoted Christian, very devoted. He always, like, after the Thursday meditation, then he will stay on for the Bible study class. He has changed over the years after he has actually started meditation. He changed to be so mellow and so appreciative and so much forgiving. So last week we went to see him the first time after a few months. And he was in the hospital, the prison hospital. And the officers told us which room was it, right? So we went in the room, and we knocked, and we went in, and we called his name. And I looked at Eva's eyes, Eva's looked at my eyes, and both of us were asking the same question in our heart, in our mind. Did we have the right room? Because we couldn't recognize him, hardly recognize him. Did we go to the wrong room? And so then I called out his name. And he turned around and he said, yeah. So we know that it was him. So we sat down, and I knew that he couldn't recognize us. But he kept talking about, getting paper and writing down a letter and asking to see his doctor, and talking about the nurse coming in and telling the nurse that he has this tooth pain, this ache is so bad, and he said, I would pay to have this fixed, and the nurse said, "No, you don't need to have it fixed." And he said, "No, I want it fixed because I don't want to live with this pain." And the nurse said, "Oh, you're still alive," right? Something like that, right? And he said, "Yeah, I'm still alive. That's why I wanted to have it fixed." But they didn't pay much attention. Of course, that might not be just a toothache. It could be from the cancer. You never know. But he was trying to fight to go out to the general public palliative care, but the institution wouldn't allow him, because once he's released into the outside public hospital, then he will be in palliative care. He would be like free, a free man. So his sentence is naturally gone. They wouldn't release him into palliative yet, up to last week. So last week we were there. We were sort of trying to find ways to relate with him. Eventually, I said, "Do you want me to pray with you?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Do you want me to read you the Bible?" He said, "Yes." So I said, "Where is your Bible?" So I looked when I asked him. I couldn't see the Bible in sight. Then he said, "Oh, it's in that shelf. It's gray in color." And we looked and we couldn't find it, a gray colored Bible. But eventually I saw a yellow Bible on the bottom shelf. I said, "This is your Bible, right?" He said, "Yeah." So I said, which chapter do you want me to read? He said, doesn't matter. So I picked out one which I am very familiar with. It's so difficult to pronounce that word. Psalm? Yeah, 23. So the Lord is my shepherd. So I read it to him, and when I read that verse, those verses to him, he was so calm. So calm, and he closed his eyes. And then after that, we had a little chit-chat, and then we meditated. When we meditated, he was calm, but the nurses and the janitor were very noisy outside. But anyway, doesn't matter. We meditated for about 10 minutes or so, and then I said, let us do some metta. As soon as I said, let us practice metta, he opened up his eyes, he started talking, blah, 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 and he wanted this and he wanted that. Then I knew it's not the time for metta. But then that was the beginning. And today, ever went again. I think you should tell the story. I wasn't there.
Sorry, I don't have the.
You can use my mic.
So today I went in. He recognized me, I think, this time, and he was saying, "Oh yeah, you know, the two came yesterday, but you know the very little one, the very very little one." I said, "You mean Sister Jessie?" And he said, "Yeah. Sister Jessie was here." I said, "Yeah, that was both of us. We came last week." And I guess what I just wanted to say is how much I saw him turn, because he started off going in quite a negative direction. Because when he wakes up in the morning and the nurses do their first rounds, the first thing they say to him is, "Oh,
You're still alive."
Yeah, you're still alive. You're still here," and it really, of course, it makes him angry. And he said, "Yeah, see, what purpose can I have?" And I said, "No, Ken. You have a purpose. Don't worry about what they think. Don't worry about what they think your purpose is. What's your purpose?" And then he said, "Yeah, you know, my purpose, I'm learning. I learned a lot. I know not to make the same mistakes. I know how to be kinder to people." And he just started naming these things and remembering. He said, "You know, we would go every week. I would go to the chapel, and you know, and he just went, and then he was just so grateful.
Yeah.
He was so grateful to all of us coming every week and spending the time with him, and grateful to, you know, I couldn't exactly tell who he was talking about. So sometimes he was talking about us as volunteers, and sometimes he would talk about other people, but just this sense of gratitude came up for him. And I was really thinking about him during this session, because he can't do anything anymore. He's just in the bed, but he can recount all those good things. And, you know, he's got life in prison, so he's got a mountain of unwholesome, but he can choose what he looks at right now. And that's why I was thinking about him, is because he can direct his mind in that way, which is so important.
Yeah.
So thank you, Sifu, so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, when you talk about him, I recall another inmate was also life in prison, but then released and dying in the hospital, and I was called upon to go and see him by his friend. I went there, and he was so unconscious, but I held his hand, and I said, but now he has passed, and I can mention his name. I said, "John, this is Sister Jessie here." I said, "Whatever that you have done, was in the past, and you have seek forgiveness already, and I'm sure your God is waiting to receive you, and you will be happier there. And so forgive yourself and seek forgiveness and go to see your God. That's what I said to him. And then with a twitch of his eyes, and I saw a drop of tears. And then and his friend said, wow, sister. His friend is also a very devoted Christian. His sister, thank you for coming. I said, oh, there's very little thing that I have done, but I just wish him to go in peace. So I said, just follow your path and just go to see your God. And so I left, and I think by the time I get back to Po Lam, which was only 10 minutes later, he already passed. His friend told me, I think I must be in the elevator. He's gone. So just like that, let go. So seeing all these dying people or inmates, seeing their changes, and we just have to keep reminding them, especially when they're dying, keep reminding them of the good deeds that they have done, and of the good changes, that are positive changes that they have succeeded. And I remember last week I said, you still remember you come to a meditation every Thursday, and every other month that one day meditation course? He said, yes, I still remember, yes, it was so nice, blah, 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 So they needed that kind of support, and I mean, they make mistakes. Who doesn't make mistake? But they don't get that kind of support, which is a shame. Yeah, but I'm glad that now they allow us to go back in, so we could go and see him more often. Yeah, so I hope that he will get that palliative. He had palliative interview today, so I hope that he will get, and then we can go to see him in the palliative care. So yeah, keep sending metta to him. May these blessings extend to all, that we with all the other living beings together will attain the Buddha way. May we wish more and more people will encounter the wise words of the Buddha, study them, understand them, practice them, help themselves to liberate from all the sufferings, and be ultimately happy and peaceful.